We are going to close this session with by rediscussing the idea of these last two speeches in the debate round, the last two rebuttals, and how they impact your judge's decision. Okay? So, think back to what we talked about yesterday in the recap that Shanna gave you this morning. What do we do in these last two speeches? The 2NR and the 2AR. This is your opportunity to talk to the judge and tell them why voting for your side, affirmative or negative, is the best decision and that they should vote for you. Now, there is a very important word in here, and that is the word why. Okay? It is not enough to just say to the judge, you should vote negative. Well, you need the judge to be able to write on his or her ballot why they think that not doing the plan is better than doing the plan. Or if you're affirmative, you need the judge to be able to write on the ballot, I think we should do the plan because of this reason. And doing the plan is better than doing nothing.
You remember when I said you want to write the judge's ballot? This is what we're talking. You give them that sentence that they could write to say, this is why I voted. So if you were negative, you could tell them, you want to vote negative because the affirmative does not solve the water problem, which means we shouldn't pass plan. See how I gave the why? They could literally go to their ballot and write that sentence out, couldn't they? And that could be why they vote. Because I told them that, and they were persuaded by it, and agreed with me that Jake didn't solve the problem. Right? So, when I'm judging, I always tell the debaters, I don't want to have to think. I want you to do my thinking for me, and tell me what you think is important, and why that's what I should look at, and not something else. Make my job as easy as possible.
Now, when you are doing this explanation to the judge of why you should vote for your side, there are two ideas that you need to remember in these speeches, okay? The first one is to tell a story. You have a specific advantage to doing your plan, right? You have an explanation of what's happening now and why it's bad and how implementing the plan can solve that problem. Or if you're negative, you have an explanation of why the status quo isn't too bad and why doing the plan is only going to cause things to get worse. But you need to tell the story of how these things happen so that to the judge it makes sense. Because otherwise, it's very easy in policy debate for the judge to get confused and lost within all these different pieces of evidence that are being read. Okay? So at the end of the day, you want to sum things up and tell a story of how things work. You want your judge to see the entire picture of how your argument works. Okay? Do you have any questions about that?
This is where you get to stand up and you don't have to read evidence. Okay? This is where you get to use your words. So this is where you stand up, you put your shoulders back, you're nice and tall, and you're very confident. And you're looking at your judge. And you're telling them that story. Okay? It's where you get to play the politician or the lawyer who is convincing someone to do something. So you don't even have, this is where you don't have to worry about the words that are written that are from other people. These are your words. So you can make them as simple as you need to, like Koki was asking. You can use those smaller words, not technical words.
Okay. Do you have questions about this? Okay. The second part is comparison. At this this point in the debate round, it is clear to everyone who's participating what the negatives arguments are and what the affirmatives arguments are. So, pretend that you are affirmative and you are giving this speech. The negative team decided that they really wanted to make the argument about that Prime Minister Abe, that disadvantage, that if Prime Minister Abe became popular again, he would repeal Article 9 and remilitarize Japan, and how, you know. In this speech, you need to make a comparison about why the impact to not doing the plan, so what's the impact to small farmers?
The impact to small farmers is they sustain the community.
Right. So you need to explain why it is more important to solve for small farmers and to sustain Japanese communities than to care about our relationship with China and South Korea. Why is it more important to solve for your advantage and to solve for that impact than the disadvantage of the damaged relations with the other countries? Now, Dr. Z talked about some ways that you can do this yesterday when we talked about these rebuttals. You can talk about which is the bigger impact between the affirmative and the negative. Which one hurts the most people, or which one helps the most people, okay? You can also talk about the idea of probability. Which is more likely, you know, the story of the disadvantage or the story of the advantage, that banning GMOs can help small farmers and help sustain communities, okay? That's where it's really helpful to tell stories so that things seem logical to the judge. And you can talk about the impacts in terms of their probability and which impact is more likely. The third way that you can make this comparison is time frame, okay? Which impact will happen faster? So, if the disadvantage happens and Prime Minister Abe gets enough popularity to remilitarize Japan, will we lose relations with these other countries faster than small farmers are able to revitalize Japanese communities? Which one happens first? The one that happens first is the one that's more important if we're looking at things from a time frame perspective. Okay? Now the thing is that you don't have to pick just one of these ways to compare these impacts. If you think that your impact is both more probable and will happen first, then you should say that. Or if you know that your opponent, say you are for the negative team, and you are going for this Prime Minister Abe disadvantage, you know that your opponent's impacts of revitalizing small communities is more probable than us losing relations with these other countries. You can say, yes, but it is more important to evaluate impacts in terms of magnitude, in terms of which impact is bigger, because it could affect more people. You know, you can explain which way the judge should evaluate these stories.
That's where you're filling in, you vote negative because.
Mm-hmm.
That's what comes after the word because to finish that sentence. The best debate teams that you'll see are the ones that do the multiple types of comparison that we've taught you. They're the ones that find out, they look and see how they matter more in more than one way. If you can only find one way though, go for that one way, because it's more important to at least say one way that you're better than to not say anything at all, right? So find one thing and explain that and just be really confident.
Now, it is important to do these things because otherwise the judge does not know how to evaluate the debate round. It's like Dr. Z was saying earlier. If I'm over here on the affirmative and I'm saying GMOs are bad, 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 and then Shanna on the negative is saying
GMOs are really great because they solve for food crises, they are cheaper to buy, and they are, if we do GMOs, or if we don't do GMOs, we're actually going to have worse relations with South Korea and China.
So, doing what Shanna did and giving explanations is always going to help your judge see the bigger picture of the debate round. Okay? I have one last big tip for you for these speeches. A lot of people spend too much time telling the story of their own argument. It's important to explain how your argument works, but you don't want to spend your entire speech doing that, okay? The biggest mistake that new debaters to policy debate make when they are giving these speeches is they stand up and they talk about how awesome their position is. And maybe they give lots of good reasons as to why their position is right. They explain their evidence and it makes a lot of sense to the judge. They still forget to address their opponent's arguments. Okay? Debate, at the end of the day, is a game of refutation and clash. That's why we've spent a lot of time talking about that today. You cannot win a debate round if you don't address your opponent's arguments.
So the one last thing is on the judging portion, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the idea in your materials packet, we wanted you to think like what your judges might think.
So page 14.
Page 14.
Sorry.
So if you're debating and you don't really know how to compare some of these arguments or these issues, hopefully these exercises will help. Okay? So in other words, if you were the judge, how would you determine who the winner is based upon these scenarios on page 14?
So the little a would be what the affirmative said, and the little b is what the negative said. So while you're reading these, you're pretending the only arguments that they ended up going for and saying you should vote on in these last two speeches, that's what they said. So circle A or B, make a decision as if you were a judge, and know why you would vote for A or B. And so you would do that for all 5 of them.
Okay. Feel free to discuss these issues with your partner.
If you're confused,
Mhm.
yeah, learn from each other.
Okay, all right. It's okay if you didn't get through all of them. That's fine. But let's start with scenario 1, okay? So the affirmative says that we need to stop global warming so that we protect a native population from rising sea levels. The negative says that their plan, whatever the plan is to stop global warming, will cause an economic collapse, which will make matters worse for the global poor communities. Okay? So, who thought that the A team had the best reasoning?
If you would have voted A, raise your hand. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Is this 4, 5?
No.
6? No, 5. Okay.
No, we're gonna there is not a wrong answer here. So don't feel shy. Is this there are different ways of thinking. So, those of you who voted for Team A, why did you vote for Team A? Good.
Very good.
So you thought that the impact for Team A was bigger than the impact. Good. Okay, excellent. Right? Who voted for Team B? Okay? Why did you vote for Team B?
He's thinking in the time frame and the how bad it would be level, and if we could possibly solve for it, but wait a little while, right? Is that what you're saying? Okay.
Okay, good. Who else voted for Team B? You were thinking in terms of magnitude as well, but just in a different way. So you were thinking in terms of magnitude of, it affects just more people as opposed to the first impact. Okay, good. How about, did anybody get to scenario 2?
So scenario 2 is that the affirmative, without a doubt, will eradicate a disease that has killed millions of people and will surely kill millions more.
But the negative says on the B team that if we implement the plan, 2 countries with nuclear weapons will have a huge war, which could cause human extinction. So, did you vote for Team A or Team B?
A, raise your hand.
Okay.
Okay.
Who voted? Did anybody vote for Team B?
You voted for team, okay.
Okay. So, somebody who voted for Team A, why did you vote for Team A? So, again, there is no right or wrong decision to make. It is all a question of, can you explain the decision? Do you have a I voted because? Can you explain that to someone? That ability to give an explanation is what you want to be able to do in these speeches. Because that is what your speech should sound like. Because as we've said, if you want these speeches to be what is on the judge's ballot.
Think about if you were the judge, what would you want Jake and I to tell you? How would you want us to tell you to vote? Would you want us to just be super vague and not say anything and talk about each other's arguments and only focus on ourselves? Or would you rather us clash, talk about each other's arguments, tell our story, and provide that comparison about why we're better than the other person, right? So even though you're not the one that gets to pick the winner, you want to make sure that you are doing what you would want to have done for you if you did get to pick the winner.